I work as a journalist for a well-reputed media group in the National Capital Region of Delhi. Crime and civic issues are generally my cup of tea when it comes to news coverage. Just to give a brief background about my personal life, I was quite a social person during my school days, and being a quote-unquote good-looking girl used to get quite a bit of attention. In my 10th standard, my senior at that time used to follow me around in the school and sometimes afterwards as well. He even chased my school bus to know where I live. Sometimes he would keep standing outside my house to catch a glimpse of me. I pretty much ignored his moves completely, but in the back of my mind, I had labeled him as a stalker and would always try ignoring him if I had the chance. He eventually confessed his feelings towards me. I didn't like the way he went on about this whole business and reprimanded him in front of his classmates. But that didn't deter him from following me at all. I used to receive cards and blank calls from him all the time. Things started to escalate so much so that my elder brother would drop and pick me up after school hours. My mother used to accompany me to the market, and I stopped going to the terrace or even near the window of my house. I thought ignoring him would be the best solution, as I didn't want my family to get involved. But in fact, he grew more confident about this whole ordeal. Somewhere he must have assumed that since I'm not making any moves against him, he might as well take it as a sign of encouragement. The blank calls increased so much that I stopped taking calls on my landline number. My father got a caller ID at home so that we picked only the known numbers. It definitely petrified me. After the stalker was forced to leave my school due to low marks in the board examinations, we thought everything was over now and that he would not disturb us further. We all got busy with life and studies. My father got transferred to various cities, and we all moved with him. After completing my studies, I got placed in one of the leading newspapers. Life was pleasant now. I had mostly forgotten the stalker and his unwanted advances towards me. It felt like things change with time. People change with time. But not him. We had forgotten all about the stalker till one day I got a mail from him. He then started sending abusive mails quite frequently. I was shell-shocked to know that he was back again. Whenever he would see my byline in the newspaper, he would mail me. I was so scared that I stopped taking bylines for stories, even for my exclusive stories. Definitely I was damaging my career because of him. My mistake was that I didn't complain against him during my school days. The biggest irony was that despite being a crime reporter dealing with cases of stalking and molestation on a daily basis, I couldn't take action on the case that mattered most. I didn't know if it was out of fear for myself or the fear of getting my parents involved in this whole circus. But I was still not ready to come out and confront this man. Just like my school days, I started ignoring him. I never responded to any of his emails, thinking he would not get to know whether the mails were being delivered to me or whether I was even reading them. But those mails definitely had an impact on me. I got scared of every new email, thinking it was from him. I stopped talking to most people. When he didn't get any reply from my side, he tricked me and got my phone number. He created a fake Facebook account under the name of my school friend, befriended everyone else from my batch, and then sent me a friend request. On seeing 40 mutual friends, I didn't doubt the credibility of the account and accepted the request. One day, the same profile asked me for my phone number. Thinking it was from my school friend, I gave my number. Big mistake. That friend never called or messaged, but within a week, I got a WhatsApp message from him. I was shocked to know that he had got my number. His long messages were all about how much he loved me, how ardently he wanted to meet me, and how he was married to me in his mind. Scared, I again decided to ignore. When I blocked him, he created fake Twitter accounts and started trolling me there. On WhatsApp, he messaged me from 6 different numbers. All the SIM cards were taken on fake identity. He also started calling me, and the era of blank calls returned. I again stopped taking calls from unknown numbers. I started losing out on stories because I had stopped taking calls from sources who used the landline or unknown numbers to give me tip-offs. All this while, I was pondering whether I should complain against him. Then one day, he again messaged, informing me that he had hacked my PAN card username and password. That is when I decided to stop this once and for all. I complained against him, not only to the crime branch of the Delhi police, but also to its economic offences wing. The complaint to the crime branch was that of stalking, and the complaint to the EOW was about him hacking my PAN card details and about the Twitter trolls. Delhi police acted promptly, and thankfully, the stalker is not disturbing me anymore. My message to everyone out there facing similar issues: whenever you're facing an issue of harassment or even someone stalking you, don't be afraid to report it, or even bring it to the notice of proper authorities immediately. Do not think that ignoring these unwanted advances will push the problem away. On the contrary, it might bring the devil right to your doorstep. I feel superstitions are a part of Indian culture and traditions, and I never paid much heed to them. But this was the first time I literally ran face first into one of them. This happened more than a decade ago. It must have been 2008 or 9 if I remember correctly. I was fresh out of college, and like most youngsters, my imagination ran wild back in those days. I always enjoyed writing and fancied myself to become a writer. To be more specific, horror thrillers were my thing. And these were the days of method acting, so I really wanted to get into the mindset of my characters before I go ahead with this new story I was coming up with. And a few days later, the perfect opportunity fell into my lap. My grandfather, who was in his mid-90s, sadly passed away. As a result, our entire family had to visit our village in South India to pay our final respects to him and to finish the family rituals, which last for 11 days. That meant both of my uncles, along with their extended families, would be joining us at the village. I never got along with either of my paternal uncles. They were too conservative to my liking. I visited this village only once during my childhood, so I vaguely remember what it was like. And when I say it's a rural village, I mean rural in a true sense. Electricity was a privilege only available to a few select houses at only select times. People used to draw water from a nearby well for their daily chores. And don't even get me started about the sanitary conditions. This was one of the things I always hated most about this place. The villagers, though, were simple-minded folk. They didn't really know much about the outside world and pretty much lived in a bubble of their own. These folk were superstitious about a lot of things, though. There were a few superstitions indigenous to this village which I've never heard of, and I doubt I ever will. Like asking a person where he or she is going right when they're ready to leave the house is shunned upon and almost derogatory to an extent. There were also a lot of rituals done for the health and well-being of the village folk. These included writing inscriptions on the house doors which said, "Oh lady, please come tomorrow," which was a direct reference to the spirits that apparently roam around this place at night time. Since this was a rather remote village, the nearest town was almost 5 to 7 kilometers away. People generally traveled to this town for all their essentials. Night hours in this village were eerily calm. It was the third day of our arrival, and I was kind of enjoying the serenity this village had to offer. These rituals would sometimes get tiresome, as we couldn't eat anything until the ceremony was completed. This particular day, the family heads were done with all the rituals, and most people resigned to bed early due to heavy exertion in the morning hours. I followed suit and tried to get some shut-eye. It was around midnight when I woke up. The stiff pillow under my head was half drenched with sweat. Power cuts were quite common around here. In fact, stable power supply was almost a miracle. It most definitely wasn't my lucky day. The heat generated as a result of 4 families crammed together made it impossible to sleep. Not to mention the loud snores and the mosquitoes actively buzzing around. When I couldn't bear it anymore, I decided to go out and embrace my longing to quote-unquote live the characters of my story. My body was also reacting to the inadequate supply of nicotine being pumped into the system ever since my arrival to this village. My father was a smoker himself, and he had an inkling that I followed suit too. Maybe the regularly missing cigarettes from his pack might have given him a clue or two. Anyhow, I decided to venture out into the night and take a stroll through the farmlands. After all, I might not visit this village ever again in my life. I slowly creeped out without anyone noticing and started walking towards our barn, which was not more than 100 yards from the house. I didn't want to venture out any further, but felt rather uncomfortable to light a cigarette so close to the house. So I walked a bit further towards the village market, edging closer to the desolate farmlands. The entire place had a strange aura at night, and it was certainly not calming. I didn't want to move away any further, so I walked towards the end of the local market, almost to the field lands, and lit a cigarette. There were paddy fields on both my sides with a long serpentine dirt road separating them. Smoke escaped from my mouth, taking with it most of my unease. As I was about to take the second drag, I saw a light bobbing towards the far end of the field. It was actually a lantern bobbing up and down, headed my way. I imagined him to be the local night guard my dad told me about. One person to guard the entire village. Not poetic at all. I felt that I could use some company and decided to wait for him. He was dressed in the local garb, had a walking stick with him, and spoke with a bit of stutter. He asked me where I lived, how come I was here, and I in turn told him about my grandparents, whom he seemed to have known. In the next few minutes I talked with the man. I wasn't sure if I could see his face clearly, mostly due to the bright lantern he carried, although I heard him properly. I felt that first shiver of fear and began to question what exactly was he doing at this hour and who he really was. He seemed to be eagerly waiting for something, or even looked like he was stalling in a sense. My cigarette was almost coming to an end, and I just wanted to throw it away and bid farewell to this man. Right when I was done, I heard someone scream my name from the marketplace that I just passed by. Looking back, I saw my dad beckoning me quite furiously. I could almost see the red on his face. I was not sure if it was because of the cigarette or due to the fact that I was wandering alone in the middle of nowhere talking to a complete stranger. This person I was having a conversation with mumbled something under his breath, which made me ask him if he was okay. His reply still haunts me to this day. With the most sinister smile on his face, he said, "You have narrowly escaped," in the local language, before moving away in the most unnatural gait I have ever seen. I knew this was not something natural, and I didn't want to be anywhere near this thing or person or whatever the hell it was. I sprinted back towards the market to the sound of my father calling out to me. I told him what had just happened. Apparently he couldn't sleep as well in that inferno of a place and was worried when he couldn't find me anywhere in the house. But he didn't reprimand me the way I thought he would. He later told me that it could have been an evil spirit. Seeing that I was lonely must have been what attracted it to me. Apparently the only thing that kept me safe was me lighting a cigarette. The warmth and the fire didn't let it get to me. I don't know if that thing was waiting for me to put out the cigarette, or if it was just toying with me. But my dad believes that smoking did save me that night. I was a proper shy girl from a middle-class family located in Gurgaon. It's been 2 years since I finished my college and started working in one of the well-known MNCs. My social circle was quite small, and I liked it that way. I generally hung out with only a select few and didn't interact much with strangers, even during social gatherings and parties. This one time, my close friend, let's call her Deepika, was throwing a party in one of these lavish places on the occasion of her being cast in a local movie, albeit in a small role. Nevertheless, she was in high spirits, and quite rightly so. This is where I met him. Let's call him Rohan. Rohan and I met at this party. He seemed like a decent guy when I first met him. A bit flamboyant, but hey, what's wrong with a tinge of vanity? Rohan and I also shared a few mutual friends. Of course, that's how he got invited to the party. We had fun and the night went great, and that was the end of it. Or that's what I wanted it to be. He had other ideas though. He somehow got my number and would often call, text, or quote unquote coincidentally land up at the same place as I was. Though I had a suspicion about his coincidental meetings, I didn't pay much attention to it. After all, we had a lot of mutual friends and he wouldn't do anything stupid. After a while, he asked me out. I said no since I was planning to move out of town for further studies. Also, I wasn't really interested in him. I guess the rejection didn't bode well with his ego. He flew into a rage and began calling me names, saying I had led him on, which I hadn't. So I decided to put this to an end once and for all and block him completely from my life. Fast forward a few months. Things were slowly but surely starting to look bright now. My professional life definitely took a good turn when my boss decided it was time for me to get promoted. He even offered me a relocation package that I was more than willing to accept. The offer meant that I would have to move to the city of Mysore. I definitely liked the sound of that, and after consulting my parents, made the move. I was a typical North Indian, and South Indian culture was different in almost every aspect, especially the food. Initially, I struggled to adjust to this new culture, but I picked up in no time. It had been almost 4 months since my relocation, and I was happy with the way things were going. Until that night. Exhausted by the day's work, I decided to hit the bed early. I was almost done closing up shop when I heard my phone beep. Someone had messaged me on WhatsApp. It was Rohan. He must have got my number from one of our mutuals. In the days that followed, he began calling and texting me in a very threatening way. He even came to the current city I was in and began following me around, texting me my current location and even a few blurry photos of myself. He began calling my friends, especially women, and went on about what kind of a quote-unquote nasty slut I was. He would call me all night long. I once woke up to 58 missed calls. I hadn't told my parents because I didn't want them to worry. My father had a serious health issue and stress is a trigger. But eventually, I had to when it started getting out of hand. I broke down and told my parents. My father immediately called him up and threatened to take him to the cops and ensure he was behind bars for the rest of his life. That scared him, I think, and he began backing off and eventually stopped. For years after that, he still stalked me online, mailed me, and even tried contacting me through social media, but I blocked him or never responded to him. The only good thing out of this was that I found who my true friends were who stood by me through thick and thin, often dropping me to my hostel after college, so I was never alone, and of course, my family's protection and love. Before I end this video, I would want to say that, being in India, we definitely get to see our fair share of cases like harassment, stalking and other things. It's really important that we address these situations before they get out of hand. Of course, there's not a single course of action to be followed everywhere. But if you're a victim of any kind of violence, enduring it silently and hoping problem goes away is not the answer in almost all of the cases. Reaching out to your near and dear ones and consulting them might be helpful. So please consider that before taking any course of action. Finally, if the experience which we have witnessed in this video turned out to be helpful to any of my viewers, even in the most insignificant way, my job here is done. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for more videos.